morning, good evening to all the participants who are joining this webinar from wherever in the world you're joining from. And welcome to this broadcast. And we are joining today on the webinar on behavioral economics from Wharton that's being presented to you today. And we'll walk you through this program for the next approximately 1 hour so that we introduce you to this program that's being facilitated by Emeritus and Wharton. And this is a wonderful opportunity for those of you who are interested in this particular module that's been offered. And it walks you through some very interesting concepts that's very relevant to the future of what is being now very topical as we go forward. And it's the intersection of both management and information technology. And before we step into that, there are a few introductory slides that I'll share with you. And let me do that. The program is about behavioral economics, consumer choice, and decision making. And like I said, consumer choice and decision making is at the heart of what all companies do. And regardless of which industry you are in, you might think that you're a manufacturing company, or you're in the hospitality business, or you're information technology, or you're an airline company. Regardless of whether it's manufacturing heavy or it is services or it is consumer industry related, data is now the new oil, and a lot of information is now being transacted to make sure that the decision that consumers make is at the heart of what employers and companies are basing their decisions on. And consumers are now driving demand and making sure that information is at the root and at the heart of what companies decide their decisions upon becomes the root of how companies are being managed. So behavioral economics is becoming more and more the heart of how companies are being managed, a very important part of how organizations are being managed today. I'm your program leader who will walk you through essentially what is going to be the core program objectives for behavioral economics and what this whole program content is all about. Like I said before, it's a very fascinating module. It's a very fascinating program. And we'll go down to the level of details about the program in a bit. The first part, why learn behavioral economics through Wharton Online? Okay, like I said, it's a real confluence of two very important parts of it. Economics has always been considered to be one of the softer sciences. When you talk about physics or chemistry or biology, it's a pure science. It's something that's a yes or a no. It's very binary. A computer science, it's all binary. It's a 1 or a 0. There's a very finite way of knowing, is it a yes or a no? Economics is also considered a kind of a science, but not a hard science. It's more of a soft science. It really revolves more to do with people, like psychology. But it is so important and getting to be even more important because psychology and economics is what makes people make decisions and do what they do. And Wharton is one of the places which really has established the first business school in the world. And as we talk about Wharton, it is the first business collegiate program that was established as the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, and is recognized globally for the intellectual leadership and the ongoing innovation across major disciplines in business education. With a global community and one of the most published business school faculties in the world, Wharton creates economic and social value across the world today. The school has 5,000 undergraduates every year, an MBA program, executive MBAs, and doctoral students with more than 13,000 participants in the executive education programs annually. It has a powerful alumni network of over 99,000 graduates. And as we speak today, the Emeritus program has an ongoing graduation ceremony for about 200 plus of its participants who are at Wharton today, yesterday and today, who have finished up their CHRO and the CTO program, and they are meeting in person at the Wharton campus as part of since they have finished a 1-year certification program, they are at the Wharton campus today as part of networking and getting to know each other in person. So with all of that, you've become part of over 3 million people who have gone through the executive education program at Wharton, learning with some of the brightest minds learning from some of the best faculty in the world at one of the most prestigious Ivy institutions in the world itself. And this is something that we love to put as one of the slides from Wharton, and this is from the Dean of Wharton. In today's environment means that you cannot afford to simply respond to or manage change. The best businesses must anticipate change and even intentionally create change itself. So you cannot ever become complacent. At Wharton, we are excited to be the partner to help you get there. So this is coming from the Dean of Wharton. And I think that kind of, in a way, captures it all for you to understand that learning is a lifelong endeavor. And as part of that, what Emeritus and Wharton brings to you is a program that in a very bite-sized manner, uh, in a very learning conducive atmosphere, you get to learn what is the future of work, what's the future of learning, and what can you take away from a program that really is very relevant, that resonates with you and becomes very engaging for you to know how can you apply it on a very day-to-day basis that becomes very relatable and relevant for you. So with that, let's get down to the program overview itself. Why do we really need to even do this program? In a way, if you look at it, there are two parts of it that we are talking about here. More and more leaders are tapping into insights from behavioral economics to make business decisions. Everybody is talking about data and about data analytics, and there is a flood of data that is out there. But data per se is completely garbage unless you can use that data to glean some very meaningful insights out of that. With a better understanding of the data, you can really glean some psychological motivations behind the consumer behavior to improve the predictability of decision making, both by consumers and by employees. And because I personally anchor the Chief Human Resources Officers program that is hosted by Emeritus and by Wharton, the program is at the juncture of what HR leaders and management offers to its participants. We see that programs such as this, behavioral economics, is at the intersection of what both management and HR leaders often employ as part of motivation for leaders, whether it's for or whether it is for consumers or the end customers. So it's very important that we use data on an ongoing basis for leveraging both consumers, that is customers, and for your own internal employees that are your within the organization itself. So the second para here is very important. In the program, you will reshape your own perspectives through elements of behavioral economics as to why people's decisions may actually deviate from the optimal choices that they would have otherwise made, and how forces such as motivation, yet their own biases and control and recognition can actually influence behavior. And think about that for a moment. You might come out with the best possible product, you might engineer the best possible car, and you think at the time of the launch of that vehicle that people should obviously go out and buy it. We built the best car, we have priced it perfectly, and suddenly you see that there is absolutely no demand for that product, and you wonder why. And it is because of the fact that you have not really taken into account a lot of behavioral economics into consideration. There are biases, there are motivational reasons, there are recognition reasons that actually influence both consumer and employee behavior. And the more you recognize that and take that into account, the more you're able to predict how consumers or employees will behave. So there's just three data points that have been included at the bottom of the slide. The first one is that there is a 146% growth in the investment in behavioral economy in the past 5 years itself. And that is massive. While there's been a lot of cut in spend in other parts of the industry, there's a 146% growth in the investment in behavioral economy. Every day, every human being makes 35,000 choices that we make on a daily basis on random things. And that is the kind of data that we can harvest to know that all of us make 35,000 decisions. And if we can know that our as part of being a human being, there are so many random decisions that kind of come across our minds. If we can harvest that information, that's part of what behavioral economics are talking about. And the percentage of CEOs that now require new or increased emphasis on behavioral science has gone up by 14%. Now, 14% might seem very small, but that 14% has gone up from being zero in the recent past. So that's where we are talking about. So this program is now anchored. The faculty who's the anchor for this particular program, behavioral economics, is Professor Judd Kessler. And obviously, since this is Wharton, all the faculty members are extremely pedigreed and, most important, very articulate. At the end of the day, any online program really rests on the shoulders of some terrific faculty members who are very articulate, very personable, and who can deliver a program with great presence and great articulation ability. And Professor Kessler is extremely articulate, extremely good at the way he delivers his lectures. And if you look at his profile and his background, he has investigated the economic and psychological forces that motivates. And part of his research has been the ability to contribute to public goods with applications including things like organ donation, worker effort, and charitable giving. So part of his research background has been, why do people do what they do, including something that is very offbeat. When people do things like charitable giving, or when you sign up for organ donation, what are the motivators? What are the things that come to your mind that when you decide that I want to give a charitable contribution, or I want to decide that I want to do blood donation, or I want to decide that when the time comes, I want to donate any of my organs, my kidneys, my eyes. What are the things that you decide that I'm going to make a decision on organ donation? He has done a lot of research that goes into human psychological decisions on making that call. Okay. It has been both psychological, it has been both economic kind of decisions that have come to that. And then the confluence of that with businesses, with economics, and so on. And a lot of it has been published in some very prestigious journals and so on. And that is what he has brought to life into organizations. So there's a lot of background that he has brought to play in bringing this program together. So the key program takeaways, when you go through this program, you will really be able to analyze how consumer behavior through decision environments and choice architecture. So some of this sounds like a little high level, but there are 6 modules in this program. And when I come to each of these modules, I'll give you some real life examples about what it actually means. Second, you evaluate how social forces motivate individuals and influence behaviors. Third, you understand and utilize principles that drive motivation and demotivation. Okay. Now think about it both from a consumer standpoint, that is external to your organization, the people who buy your goods or services, and internal to your organization as an employees of your organization. Fourth, you evaluate how present biases impact decision making, in the sense that when you have a customer outside, they already have some biases. Now, if you are a buyer of a vehicle, you may have a bias that a particular car brand is a low end car or a high end brand. Now, if that low end car brand has to go up the value chain, how do you change the perception of a consumer that this car, a Maruti car or a Corolla car, is no longer a low end or a low brand vehicle, that they have invested in the brand, they have invested in the product, and now there are a lot more functions and a lot more features that the consumer should be willing to pay a premium for that vehicle. How do you change that bias in the mindset of the consumer or in the mindset of an employee, that the company has grown, the company is no longer a startup, the company is no longer a small company, that they are a much bigger company and a much bigger brand, should choose to stay back with that company instead of leaving the company for a much bigger company that they think is the company to be with. The fifth one is to examine tax salience, hidden fees, and add-on charge decision influences. And I'll pause when we come to module 5 of this program about what tax salience or hidden fees really means. So these seem like big words at this point of time, but not really when I talk about some very specific examples here. And the last module, the sixth module of this program, is about identifying ways that governments and organizations can take advantages of individuals. So with that, let's talk about the various program topics itself. Like I said, the program is very neatly divided into 6 modules, and each module is 1 week. So it's a 6-week program, and each module runs for 1 week. Module 1 is about influencing behavior and choice. So you begin with a foundational insight in week 1. And in week 1, the foundational insight is about the choices that we make and how it is used to influence behavior. How do you evaluate how choice architecture is used to influence behavior and examine how do consumers respond to set defaults and learn how to choose the default options. You assess how default impact decision making and influence behavior. And let's talk about it from a very simple, very practical example. All of us, when we work for an organization, there are some things that are defaults that can be set in to help influence behavior. For example, if you're in the US or anywhere in the world, there are some things like a medical benefits program. Okay. You are asked to enroll in a medical benefits program, and the HR department has to follow up and chase employees to sign up for the medical benefits program. Or you might have something like a pension program. In the US, it's called a 401k program. In other parts of the world, there might be similar savings program that when you retire, you're eligible for savings. I think in India, it's called a provident fund plan. In some other parts of the world, there might be something equivalent, wherein at the end of your working life, you might be able to have tax sheltered savings that you can draw from. Now, if you have to if you are if you have to sign up for that program and it is not automated by itself, chances are a lot of employees are just not savvy enough to contribute into that plan, that there is a kind of an inertia not to actually go in onto the portal and sign up for that plan, because they may not be savvy about it, they may be a little lethargic about it, and so on. In a lot of companies now, sometimes by law and sometimes by the company plan, they are enrolled into it by default and maybe at the lowest level of contribution. Likewise, for the medical plan, when they join the company, they are signed in by default. And at the end of every plan year, unless you opt out of the plan, you're automated and you're signed in by default, so that you roll over into that plan year over year at the same level of benefits that you were signed in the previous year. That is the way by which, by default, you're signed into the same program. Likewise, even think about it with the external world. A simple example here: if you have signed up for a lot of subscription services, like your Netflix subscription service or any other subscription service, unless you sign out of that plan, by default, your credit card is being charged $9.99 or whatever is the subscription rate on a monthly rate or on an annual rate every year. So you need to wash your credit card statement. Otherwise, you would not even know that you are signed up for that plan. These are some of the ways by which the consumer behavior is being tracked and it is being influenced. So behavioral economics is as simple as that companies, both with external consumers and with internal employees, can track and monitor the behavior very easily. So this is something that we ought to know. And the purpose of this particular module is to help us become aware of the fact that this is a very important part of how companies are operating today. This subscription model is a very important part of how companies are operating their budgets and managing their revenues and their cash flows with the external market. And this is a very important part of how HR departments are managing employees and their motivations and encouraging them to be motivated and to stay with the programs of their internal organization. So that, in a way, is a great example of just helping you understand how important these things are in influencing both external consumers and internal employees from a behavioral economic standpoint. The second module is about social forces on decision making. So if you look at it, you learn to identify the types of decisions where you can leverage social forces and how leaders can use different types of social levers to influence behavior. You examine how social norms and comparisons influence decision making. You identify the types of decisions where you can leverage social information or how social forces and different types of social settings can influence behavior and how social recognition influences your own behavior. Very simple things. For example, if you take social media, for example, as simple an aspect at the workplace or at schools or in the social media, things like bullying at schools is part of how peer pressure operate in the external medium, right? Why do peer pressure is such a big part of how social media operates? The fact that there is so much of advertising that happens to make sure that every kind of advertising, every kind of role modeling is all to send in very innocuous messaging about how you're supposed to be in terms of the kind of role models that are suggested, which is why a lot of models are also, it is not only the perfect fit, but also different kind of role models that are now being suggested. There is not one size fits all in the new scheme of things. As we are now being more progressive as a society, it is also being suggested that it is not one size fits all, that there are different models that one has to be suggested so that it is a more inclusive society that we are trying to create for ourselves. The second part is that there is so much of information that as the world gets a little more polarized, there is more opportunity for social information to be out there so that there is more information that can be more broad based so that it is not one segment of the society that is becoming more information oriented, that information is democratizing the overall society. So the point of this module is to make sure that decision making can become more democratized and it is more universal. So a lot of the behavioral economics here is to talk about the fact that you can have a lot of information that is out there, but information and economics go hand in hand, both with consumers and with our own internal set of employees. All your consumers have all the information that they require to make very informed decisions. And companies also have the data. While companies have data to make decisions for themselves, on the other hand, consumers also have a lot of data. So the data is on both sides of the equation. And that's the point that this model tries to explain, that if you look at the last point here, you analyze how social recognition influences behavior. The point here being that even within your organization, when you recognize employees with a lot of recognition tools, that helps a lot of motivation or demotivation. Employees that don't get recognized are the employees that are leaving organizations. The employees that get quick recognition and instant gratification are the ones that stay within the organization. The third module is about inequity, aversion, and reciprocation. So here is about explore employee behavior by understanding the effect of inequity, aversion, and reciprocity. So if you look at how this is more about core to internal organization and how behavioral economics helps the CHRO or the HR organization help the internal employees of the organization itself. Inequity and aversion and helps the internal decision making of the organization itself. And corporate decisions on pay affect worker performance and behavior. The impact of pay equity in the labor market is one of the biggest reasons for employee turnover and attrition. The power of reciprocity and gift exchange in motivating behavior. So this is something that we talk extensively about in the Chief Human Resource Officer program from Wharton. And while we talk about the great resignation or when we talk about quiet quitting, this is the heart of the problem, especially in a very tight labor market. That the biggest example here is that when we talk about right now, and since the World Cup soccer is going on, the US men's soccer team had a huge issue in the last 2 years, wherein the pay equity between the US soccer team and men's soccer team and the US women's soccer team has now become the same. And despite the fact that there's a lot more money that is generated by the US men's soccer team as against the US women's soccer team, because obviously there's more fan following for the men's soccer team, they decided that the pay equity has to be the same for both teams. It's part of what's seen as gender pay equity, because unless you come to those kind of dimensions, you will see that there is inequity and there is an aversion, and it creates more dissonance within the companies itself, because at the end of the day, you need to move towards a situation wherein there is equal pay for equal work. Otherwise, you have a lot of issues, because more and more the gender balance within the workplace is becoming equal. At one point of time, there was inequity in terms of gender balance at the workplace. There were obviously more male than female in the workplace. More and more across the world, in all cultures, in all parts of the world, that gender balance is becoming, and is starting at the university level, where there are equal men and women at the university level, and that will lead to the gender balance at the workplace, and that should lead to obviously the balance in pay levels also. So when you have inequity at the pay level, it will lead to aversion and inequity in terms of motivation levels also. So this is where the motivation level and the behavioral economics comes to play, and up to management and up to human resource leaders to make sure that those things are taken into account, so that issues do not come at the workplace that leads to imbalance at work and demotivation at work. The fourth thing was about motivational strategies, and again, to explore management concepts such as motivation and demotivation, and learn how gamification and personal identity can influence worker behavior. So again, taking from the previous module, we build upon how control as a strategy and when to use it, the demotivating effects of control and how you might mitigate them, to understanding of behavioral forces and to propose ways to motivate employees, and to identify gamification can influence behavior and work performance. And when we talk about control as a strategy and when to use it, there is always a certain level of control that works, and sometimes it works as a counterproductive influence. Some amount of control is always required, but it can be counterintuitive or counterproductive when there is too much of control, because at the end of the day, everyone wants to be free to be working in their own individual capacity. Nobody wants to be micromanaged. All organizations require some level of control, but too much of control tends to be micromanagement, and nobody wants that. That tends to become demotivating, and you want to ensure that there is some level of oversight, but not too much of micromanagement. And the importance of knowing that there is a behavioral element of demotivation that is involved in that is super important. And the fact that there is an element of gamification, and most people understand that whether it is with consumers or whether it's with employees, you will know that in a lot of things, almost like the lottery, whenever there's an element of gamification with consumers and with employees, everybody gets interested, everybody gets excited, and they all want to play because there is an outcome, there is a winner, and there is a level of engagement, there's a level of motivation when there's a game that is to be played and there's an outcome and there's a winner. That helps the motivation of everybody involved to stay engaged and to be more excited to play, because that's pay to play, so to speak, as they call it. The idea here is that you want your consumers and you want your employees to be very sticky and to be engaged in your overall program. The control element is just to make sure that there is oversight, but it is not overbearing, and it is not it is not something that is seen as too overbearing. Module 5 is about the influence of present bias. And we spoke about biases earlier when we started this webinar. And the fact that we all have certain levels of bias preset in anything that we do. And understanding a consumer's perspective through studying the present bias and how it impacts the product's value influences their purchasing decision and causes inconsistent behavior. This module evaluates the present bias that can cause the inconsistent behavior and influencing purchasing decisions. It examines the present biases and impacts the perception of the product's value, right? And to mitigate or leverage the present bias in the decision making, and how discounted utility and preferences for instant gratification can impact the decision. And let's take some examples of that. In the sense, you might approach a particular product or you might approach a particular service with a pre existing notion or a pre existing bias about its value. And every product in its life cycle wants to grow up the value chain. And you are stuck with the fact that your consumer or your employee has a pre existing notion or a bias that you have to work very hard to overcome that bias. And companies spend a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of investment in marketing, in actual product development, in actually spending money and effort in upgrading that brand, upgrading the product, upgrading that service with investments in that. But the perception takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to change, because it's always that moment of truth with the consumer, right? You spend a lot of time, a lot of effort in upgrading the value of the product, but one experience, poor experience, can nullify all of that. It's like going to a restaurant where you had one negative experience and the restaurant does everything in their power to upgrade the decor, the food, the chef, the staff, and everything else. And then you go there after 1 year, and maybe again the dish is a little spicy or a little salty, and you again decide not to go there for a year again, in spite of the fact that they've done everything right. But one negative experience again ruins the entire experience for that one particular customer again, in spite of the fact that all the critics are giving it a 5-star rating. That's what they're talking about here, about the biases and how it can impact a product's value and influencing the purchase decisions and so on. The influence of present biases leads to a lot of behavioral economics. And that is something that both companies have to work through extremely hard with both consumers and with their internal employees. So the professor talks about a lot of these kind of examples in how can you mitigate those things and what can you do to make sure that these kind of experiences are really taken into account and discounted when you are approaching either a product or a service or your own internal employees. The last module 6 about tax salience and pricing. Now, tax salience sounds like a big word, but when you dive further into purchasing decision and by exploring the influence of pricing, transparency, and taxes and surcharges and so on, and discussing ways that organizations increase revenue through add-on costs, let's discuss that for a minute. What does tax salience and pricing strategy, pricing transparency actually mean? We all know discount airlines or discount hotels really do their pricing. So you have a really low initial price for that airline ticket, okay? And then you have multiple other charges that are added on. And at the end of the day, you might have a $99 ticket for your base fare. And then you have a charge for your carry-on luggage, for a water bottle on the flight, for something else and so on. And by the time that you have fully paid your ticket and everything else, your full price ticket is now $300. And probably your full service airline ticket was also $300. So that's what tax salience is really all about. It's the way your tax is really displayed to you. That the way the tax is displayed gives you a feel of how you will actually evaluate or look at the tax. It's a new lexicon or a new way of tax transparency or tax pricing, or the way people make their purchase decision or buying decision based on how they perceive how the tax is displayed to them. Tax saliency or pricing transparency influences a lot of economic decisions because it is all behavioral. So if you look at tax saliency or how companies charge pricing or how hotels charge pricing or how companies do their pricing right now, it is all very emotional. The way, can you see my screen right now? Yeah, okay. I think you can. It depends upon how you can. It's a very emotional decision that we make based on how the pricing is structured on your on the purchase price. Likewise, the importance of tax saliency determines whether we buy the product or the service or not. And then the shrouded attributes such as hidden fees and surcharges. Sometimes whether you book on Airbnb or whether you book a hotel or any product or service, and then there are some hidden fees or surcharges and so on, you get very emotionally upset. Or when you get an offer, or when you join a company and suddenly you find that you thought that you had an offer and you thought that your bonus was structured in a particular way, and you don't get the kind of bonus that you thought you were going to get, you get very upset that your bonus is much smaller than what you thought it would be, because it had shrouded attributes that you did not fully understand at that point of time. It's all about what is, in a way, part of the behavioral economics, in the sense that it is a shrouded attribute that you did not fully understand at that point of time. So identifying the ways organizations can generate increased revenue by taking advantage of what consumers or employees did not fully understand is the last point, where I think what the professor is explaining is that both organizations and governments really do not fully disclose or identify some of the hidden taxes or shrouded attributes of some of these taxes or fees that are a little hidden within the whole scheme of things. So at the end of these 6 modules or these 6 weeks is where you come to the end of your program. And as part of your final project, what you do is that you pick a concept from the entire course, from across these 6 modules. You pick a concept from the course, and a final submission or a final project, like a capstone project, is that you write a memo to your own CEO, or if you're currently between assignments, or if you're not working full time at this point of time, think of a company that you have worked for before, maybe one of your favorite companies that you worked for before, your favorite leader. And as an assignment, as a submission, as a capstone project, as part of a deliverable for meeting the requirements of this course, you write a memo to your CEO expressing your views on how your organization should best, in terms of this final project, should apply that project, should best apply that particular concept. You present your views to your cohort. So it is not as if you will be presenting your views to your cohort, but that's your final submission, or your final project is to write a memo to the CEO expressing your views on how an organization should best apply that particular concept. Your ability to apply the concept and frameworks from that module to these real world environment will determine your final grade within this particular program, is the way this particular project ends. So in a way, the program experience is really very different, in the sense that what you will see is that across these 6 weeks, you have weekly discussions. You have a program leader who's assigned. So unlike many other online educational sessions, there are lots of online executive education programs, but this is really different in the sense that obviously it is from Wharton, one of the globally accredited, one of the most famous Ivy League schools in the world. You have a dedicated online full-time, not a full-time, you have a dedicated program leader, and you have a weekly session with the program leader. It's once a week, and while this is a 6-week program, every week on an assigned day, there's a 1-hour weekly session online that you get to attend with the program leader, just like we're doing it right now. There's a final project that we just talked about, which becomes like your capstone project that you submit. There are weekly assignments at the end of every week. There's a weekly assignment that you submit that gets graded, and then you get feedback on your weekly assignments that you submit. There are lots of reflection prompts every week. There are lots of assignments that you need to submit, and these are not very difficult. There are some prompts. You submit your assignments against those reflection prompts, and just to make sure that you are in with the program and you're keeping pace with the weekly sessions, there are lots of knowledge checks, so that against every week's content, as you go across the tabs, there are knowledge checks just to make sure that you're keeping pace with the content of that particular week. So that there are knowledge checks. And there are try it yourself activities. This is part of the gamification within the content of the program on a week-to-week basis itself. And at the end, there are a lot of things that you, as cohort participants, you will be able to do a lot of online chats on the platform. The online platform is called Canvas. You'll be having a lot of chats amongst the cohort participants on the Canvas platform itself. And there are live webinars. The live webinars is what is hosted by the program leader every week. Summary, what to expect from each week. I would think that this is a program for folks who are actually working executives, professionals, lifelong learners, and you would expect that a time commitment of about 4 to 6 hours per week. It's a 6 week commitment because the program runs for about 6 weeks, but it is very bite-sized learning. It's real world application. This is a final project. There are week video lectures, weekly discussions. There's a live webinar every week that is hosted and anchored by a program leader. There are lots of tried activities. There are weekly knowledge checks that are there, and frequent course communications from your program leader to guide you through your experiences, so you're not out there left alone. You have the ability to communicate very often with your program leader. The program leader is available to you by email and every week on the live webinars also, so that anytime that you have a doubt or you have a question, the program leader is accessible to you. All your submissions are graded, and you get, when I say it's graded, it's not as if this is not grade school or it's not college, wherein you are graded on a grade point average or something. It's a pass fail, it's complete incomplete, so that you're not really being evaluated. It's more that you're competing against yourself. It is more to just make sure that somebody's looking at it, somebody's evaluating it, and somebody's giving you feedback about how you're doing, and to make sure that you're on course to completion. But it's really something that is very detailed, and you will really enjoy the program for two reasons. One is the content is great, the content is very relevant, it is very relatable, and it is something that makes learning sense from two points of view. Because it is behavioral economics, it is something that is at the confluence of both management and economics. It is something that you can apply whether you are in management or whether you are in HR, whether you are a consumer or whether you are an employee. Because what you do at the workplace as an employee is what you're doing as a consumer when you're buying goods or services from any organization. And at the end of the program, this is what you can expect to be getting. You get a certification from the Wharton School of Business. You earn a digital certificate that you can be displaying on your LinkedIn profile. It's a e-certificate. There's a verified certificate that you get from the Wharton School, from the Emeritus Institute of Executive Education. And this is something that is your keepsake. It's an awesome thing. Like I said, there are millions of people who have gone through the Wharton School of Executive Education. And like I said, the CHRO program, of which I'm a very active part of, I'm a success coach for the Chief Human Resource Officer program that is offered by the Wharton School in partnership with the Emeritus organization. Over 200 of the participants of that program are currently at the Wharton School right now, because they finished the CHRO program that was over 9 months long, and they are having their get-together celebrations at the Wharton School right now as we speak. So with that, if there are any questions that we can answer for you, would be happy to do that. I know that you can download the brochure for this program from the link that is there right now. And I know that the advisors are waiting on call. If you have any questions, there's a link that is there right now for you to be able to. Let me do that. You can download the brochure from here from this site. There are counselors and there are advisors that are available. The telephone numbers are there for you to be able to call these numbers, or you can even apply on that link that you can see on the screen that I'm sharing right now. You can click on that apply now link, and you can talk to any of the advisors. You can talk to the course experts who can answer any of the questions related to this behavioral economics course. If you have any questions on the course itself, like I said, the advisors to the program are on the call. They can help you navigate either the Emeritus, the Wharton process for enrollment into the program, or you can just apply on the link and they can help you walk through the process of enrollment. There's also a post about how you can register for the course. You can click on that link. And if you have any other additional questions, you can also send it to wharton@emeritus.org. Thank you, everybody, for joining the call today. And we look forward to seeing many or all of you enrolling for this program on behavioral economics to be launched very soon. Thank you so much for joining today.